Welcome to the Most Dangerous Device radio show, where we discuss free energy and over-unity devices and their impact on society. Our very first guest for the Most Dangerous Device is appropriately Sterling Allan, the primary driving force behind PESWiki.com, PESN.com, FreeEnergyNews.com, NewEnergyCongress.org, and most recently, EnergyNest.org. I want to welcome you to the Most Dangerous Device radio show, Sterling. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Nice to be on your show.
You certainly are a busy person, and you've got a 1-hour weekly radio show also, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, what got you started doing this?
Well, I started a decade ago. A friend of mine sent me some information. We had a conversation, a long conversation. His name is Welton Myers, and he got me excited about that free energy devices were really real, and he'd seen stuff. He'd one of the stories I should tell you, he was involved with the technology, a magnet motor type device. He was playing with it, and the thing actually took off the bench and went through the ceiling.
Oh my God.
And so, he had me interested, and so life has never been the same ever since. And, whether or not that story was real, I certainly have come across a lot of interesting things in the course of studying and interviewing and talking to different people, checking things out. And I'm still somewhat of a virgin myself in terms of actually seeing for myself stuff. But just because it's so expensive to get on a plane and go see stuff for yourself, so by the time you get on and you go to check out a claim and it ends up being bogus, or it doesn't work the day you're there, or, there's a lot of things that just don't pan out. You know the story yourself from having tried to see things for yourself. I can't say that I'm 100% virgin in seeing real working devices, but I'm close to it. But I do believe in the concept that what the mainstream media tells you, what the mainstream science tells you is impossible, really isn't impossible. We've seen that over and over again, even with, for example, flight. Mainstream science says that would never happen. And yet, obviously, they were wrong about that about a century ago, as seen over and over again every time we get on a plane. And so they were very wrong about that, and I'm sure that they're very wrong about some of these free energy devices. When I say free energy, and you mentioned the terminology, I've redefined that terminology to mean things that are free from the environment, free for the taking. Solar is free, wind is free, geothermal is free, and yet, obviously, the devices that harness that energy are not free. And so the idea is to come up with a device that's inexpensive, that harnesses these modalities from the environment that are free for the taking, that are cheaper than what we have to pay for solar, wind, geothermal, tide, because obviously those modalities are quite expensive. They're not anything close to being as cheap as what you pay for coal-fired plants, natural gas plants, etc. But we're talking about devices that could be 10 times cheaper than what we pay from the grid. Once they're commercialized, once they're comes down to economy of scale. And so in the decade that I've been covering this, I've seen a real maturation in the industry. And last year I started using the terminology that we've achieved escape velocity, where there's enough momentum that has been established with these modalities that we're going to see them come to market no matter what. They've achieved enough momentum, enough people behind them, enough competitors working together. I mean, that might sound weird. There's enough competitors working to try and beat each other, I should say.
Yeah. I think Greg Braden said it best. He says that the history of humanity is full of examples where cooperation is the model that works and not competition. And you bring up an interesting point, and one of the reasons that I got interested in this entire topic is how it relates to the monetary system. Have you seen any device that produces more energy out than it consumes?
I'd have to say yes. I went to South Africa and I saw a device there. I went to my audience and I said, hey, there's this device down in South Africa. Could you help me get there? And I had a whole bunch of people chip in for an airline ticket and to actually buy one of these things and take one home with me. It turned out to be a little more complicated than that, but I was able to see a device that was very interesting. And I can't say with 100% certainty that it was exactly what they said it was, but it was really an interesting trip, an interesting device. It wasn't quite ready to go to market like they had thought it was. It turned out that they did some additional testing, and it was really hard on the batteries. It's not ready to go to market because it does hammer the batteries, so they have to work out a few bugs and whatnot. But I saw a device that, and this is just one of several I could mention, but it's one that's most recent and maybe is foremost on the minds of the people that I talk to a lot in reporting on my news. I saw a device that had a DC motor that was turning an AC generator through a shaft, and the DC motor that was turning it was powered by 4 batteries, just kind of regular 12-volt deep cycle batteries that you might see on the solar system, for example. Sitting underneath the bench, and we had about 4 people, scientists with us that were there to kind of oversee and to make sure that we weren't being tricked. And one of them had built a device like it himself, Johan, and I did a story about him separately, both a couple years before that trip as well as one after that trip. And he knew what he was seeing, and he had built one himself before and after that trip. And he was like totally keyed into it, and he says, yep, these guys have got it. He could see the circuit. He knew it. He was, for you and I, when we see a circuit board, it's like seeing Chinese, it's like, yeah, right, okay. But this guy knew what he was seeing, and he knew that they had done what they were saying they were doing. And he was all over it. He was really excited about what they had done. But anyway, there was a circuit that was, basically harvesting some of the back EMF, which when you turn a motor, you've got some stuff's working back. There's some stuff that goes on in the motor that works against you, so to speak. Anyway, they were harvesting some back EMF. They were also doing some other stuff. And so a couple of batteries were turning the generator, or were powering the DC motor that was turning the generator. And a couple of them were being rejuvenated, were being recharged. And then they were switching back and forth. And the circuit was basically saying which was doing what when. And we saw the thing run for a lot longer than it should have run. And there was no other stuff involved in the circuit. There was nothing coming from the wall. Basically this thing was self-running. And it was putting out between 4 and 5 kilowatts, depending on what we had plugged in at the time. There was some toasters, there was some a fan, there was basically 4 kilowatts of load going on, and those were basically rated equipment from the manufacturers. You could see the nameplate, how much power it would consume, and so yeah. Then we. When we had lunch and came back, the thing was still running. Yeah, you could argue, well, there was some Mickey Mouse stuff going on while you were gone. I don't think so. But we saw it running long enough while we were there that it could rule out that there was something, it should have run down, a long time. It should have started going slower at least, but it was running full power, for a lot longer than it should have while we were there. And then we went and had lunch, came back, a couple hours later. The thing was still as happy as could be. But Yeah, it wasn't a fully vetted, fully scientifically documented, but I was happy with what I saw. So that's a story that I could tell, yeah.
All right. I want to share something with you and get your opinion about this. You're familiar with the term resonance. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you're familiar with acoustical resonance and electrical resonance.
Right. And I should add that resonance is a key in a lot of these systems. If you could use one term that kind of capsulizes what Nikola Tesla was about, it was resonance.
Exactly. And my point is, and I wanted to get your feedback on this, it seems to me that the amount of energy that it takes to keep something in resonance is much less than the amount of energy it takes to actually start something going. And if you have a device that is resonant and it is working and producing peak power at a resonant frequency, then the amount of energy it takes to keep that circuit going must be less. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with, I'm not really sure what country he's in, but he gives the demonstration of a physical device with resonance. Imagine a seesaw with a very, very heavy weight on one side, and then a pendulum on the other side of the seesaw that equals the weight of the other side.
Yes, Milkovich.
Is that his name? Okay, Thank you. And you can turn the pendulum and have the seesaw going back and forth, but the amount of energy it takes to keep the seesaw going is very little, yet the seesaw can lift hundreds of pounds. That, to me, is a description of overunity. Would you agree?
The reason that that's not quite so obvious or a slam dunk, so to speak, is because I agree that system does exemplify overunity types of principles, that there's more energy that's coming out than what you put in. But people would argue there's a lot of leverage going on that we don't fully understand. And when you get leverage going on, there's some math and whatnot, some very heavy-duty math. But I agree that is a system. There's a lot of people working on systems like that do exemplify overunity principles. Yeah.
All right. Well, just so we don't just take two, do you have some other device that you could share that you have seen personally that exemplifies overunity? It doesn't have to be recent. It can be anything that comes off the top of your head.
Well, I did see a cold fusion system on my way back from that trip to Johannesburg. I stopped through Athens, right actually when Athens was going up in smoke in February when they were having their rites and stuff. It was kind of funny. I was about a half hour from landing, and I pulled up some email that was talking about the news that was going on in Athens. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm about to land there. But anyway, yeah, I saw the Defcalion system that is number 2 in our top 10. Our top 5 exotic free energy technologies. If you go to top5energy.com, is a shortcut domain name for our top 5 listing at PezWiki. And it's a very exciting technology. I saw their lab setup. They've had somewhere in the ballpark of 7 third-party groups that were going into basically come under license with them for taking these technologies to market. And they let me come in. It's a very busy time for them. They had to kind of change their schedule a little bit on my behalf. It was kind of last minute, but I was able to squeeze some time from them. I was able to meet the CEO and several other people there. And it was really amazing to see their setup just before they had these teams come in. That has yet to be published. They're going to be doing a big cannonball splash presentation in August, from what I understand, as part of an international conference that's going on. They're going to be making their kind of big to-do about what happened during those presentations. And also I had an inside source on that was feeding me information about what was going on from several different sources that were able to see that presentation. That was really exciting. I would say that even though I didn't have a full understanding of what was going on with what I saw during the presentation, I saw enough that I was satisfied that what's going on there is indeed genuine. They have an excellent team. They know what they're doing. And I have a lot of confidence in that group. And they're number 2 in our top 5.
What is number 1?
Number 1 is Andrew Rossi's cold fusion technology. Out of Italy and Miami. He's in Miami right now, but he originally is from Italy, and a lot of his stuff that's going on is going on in Italy.
You know, I would say that, don't we live in an expanding universe, ever expanding universe? And in my rhetorical, this is just a statement. If we are living in an expanding universe and energy is related to mass, wouldn't that also state that energy is being created all the time? You don't have to answer.
Well, I do know that we don't know everything. That's for sure. Yeah. And I also know that new wine cannot be put into old bottles. And if the establishment is anything, it's old bottles. And you really can't look to the mainstream science to be where all the solutions are at. There's a lot of good stuff that happens in mainstream academia, but I know from personal experience that the mainstream is full of problems. Mainstream academia.
Yeah, I was going to talk about some of those. Actually, I was going to get into this area of patents and everybody's interest in wanting to protect their idea and keep it secret. Whereas, really, I mean, what we should do is open source all of this. We should open source the entire Over Unity area, in my opinion. This is just me personally.
Yes and no. I agree with you to a large extent, and there's not a lot of people that are more in favor of open source than myself. And and I think we have a good track record here at PES Network for having been strong advocates of the open source paradigm. If you go to the open source page of our website, the index page, you'll see a lot of projects that we've tried to help. People who are willing to open source, and we've also have had some success. You know, we open sourced the Bedini project way back in 2004. There have been hundreds of people who have been able to replicate what we did there and have gone a long distance with what we helped launch there. Rick Friedrich basically made a career out of what we started there, and with John Bedini's project. And that's just one example of a success story, of many that we could cite. But we have yet to see a really good open source project that produces a lot of power. There's a lot of scams that have started up on the internet because of the success that we've had in the open source genre, where they have basically exaggerated to the nth degree something that kind of works, and they get people to buy these plans, and they never end up. Maybe we could go into it a little bit more later, but just the bottom line is there are a lot of scams on the internet where you can download plans for something that's supposed to power your house that turns out is never going to power anything, let alone your house. But,
right. Well, that gets back to the fact that we use money for everything here. But if we're going to tie money to energy, and then we're going to give everybody a free energy device that can sit in their homes, and all of a sudden everybody's wealthy. This is a radical concept. It's one that I present in the book I was telling you about that I'm writing. But before we can even get there, people need to know that these devices exist, they work, that what they are being taught in schools and what they are learning right now is not the full story. Like, for instance, how many people, when you say you've seen an over unity device work, say that's impossible? It violates the laws of physics.
Well, and what I say is that we don't know everything about physics, and any honest scientist knows that that science is all about discovery of what we don't know yet and characterizing phenomena that we observe, coming up with a hypothesis and testing it, etc. I'm all for science, but the problem is that a lot of mainstream science has turned into politics. And as soon as you get politics involved, science goes out the window.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and the problem with mainstream science is that science went out the window a long time ago because politics is so involved with mainstream science that it's basically is no longer science.
And science is tied to money, which is tied to politics, which is tied to the people in charge, which are they control the energy. So this whole over-unity movement needs to be done on a cooperative, collaborative basis. And
I agree, and there's a lot of cooperation that's going on outside of the mainstream academia, but there's a lot of really good scientists that are still in it. Like one of the best scientists is at MIT. Mitch Schwartz, doing some great work since January of 2012, and we're now in July. He's been running a 7 times over unity cold fusion demonstration in his lab, and you can go and see that if you want to. He lets people come in.
What's the URL so people listening can actually go see that?
If you just Google Mitch Schwartz, and that's S-W-A-R-T-Z. His first name is Mitch, but if you Google Mitch Schwartz, you'll find him, Dr. Mitch Schwartz at MIT.
We've been talking about laws and the various laws of physics that are taught in universities. And we're also talking about the politics that affect the science to do in research. Is there any hope that the truth will ever come out?
Absolutely. And I really think that as what's happening right now is that the mainstream is having its last hurrah. And I like to use the analogy of addiction because I really feel like it's an excellent analogy. And a lot of people can relate to addiction because either they have it themselves or they know somebody who's addicted to, whether it's alcohol or whether it's drugs or whether it's sex or whether it's food. I mean, everyone knows somebody who's addicted or is addicted themselves in one way or another, right? Mm-hmm. And so we all understand the criteria and situation of addiction. And right now what we have is society is addicted to the power brokers. And the power brokers are addicted to power. What's happening is the power brokers, we're about to hit the wall big time. We've become addicted to oil. We've become addicted to polluting energy sources, oil and natural gas, and it's all polluting in one way or another. Coal is very polluting, and what's happening is that you look at a bad marriage where you have an abusive husband who beats his wife, and she's codependent. She lets him do it, and finally she says, "I've had enough." And he's about to kill her because she doesn't want to let him go. It's either me or no one. And she's trying to get out, and he's throwing knives around. He's about to light the house on fire. I mean, this is the kind of situation we have with the power brokers that are getting tired of this. They know that they have a problem, but they're kind of, they're beside themselves. They don't know what to do about it. And this kind of the dynamics that we have as a society right now is we have a situation where we're about to hit the wall. And the question is, are we going to hit the wall? Or are we going to wake up in enough time to realize that we've got a problem and go into a program of recovery where we start saying, hi, my name is Sterling and I'm an addict or are we going to hit the wall? Are we going to end up in prison, lose everything that we have before we realize that we've got a problem?
Wouldn't you think that education is a key part of this awakening process for the general public? Don't they first need to know the situation they're in?
Yeah. And that's why the alternative media has been so wonderful, is because the alternative media is the answer to the mainstream media, which is just messing up left and right. And that's one of the things that's going to happen is when people realize that cold fusion is not junk science, that it's real, that there have been 17,000 replications of cold fusion over the years.
17,000?
17,000 by the estimate of one of the people who runs a website, canr.com. Jed Rothwell has estimated that they're on and this was last year actually.
Why isn't this mainstream news?
Well, there has been some pretty good coverage of cold fusion by mainstream news. 60 Minutes did an excellent documentary a couple of years ago on cold fusion. It was outstanding. We've got a link to it on our website where you can watch it. There has been some pretty good coverage about this stuff off and on, but the problem is that it's just going to be a while before it kind of catches on. There's a statement that's really funny. Yesterday's heresy is tomorrow's dogma.
Oh, yeah. 3 stages of truth. Yep. That's what comes to my mind. First, it's ridiculed, then it's violently opposed, and then it's accepted as...
Yeah, it's self-evident.
Self-evident, yeah, right.
Yep.
One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about is, have you ran into any situations where you've got, of people that have got a device that produces more energy out than it consumes, an over-unity device, free energy if you want to call it that.
And because it's harnessing something that we don't fully understand yet, but coming from somewhere.
Right.
I don't believe in the idea of something for nothing. I really don't.
Okay.
Any free energy device is simply harnessing energy in a way that we've never fully understood before, but it's not magic. Yes, magic for one person is science for another person.
Okay. All right.
Right.
I'll give you that. Have you known of anybody who has interrupted the process for getting that device out on the market?
Right now, one thing that's really exciting is that's what our top 5, that top5energy.com is all about, that top 5 energy devices and runners up. These are devices that are not in the market yet, but they're in process of getting to market. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of 2012, we will not see one, but maybe 2 or 3 devices that have actually made it to market where you can actually buy one.
Wow.
Now, cold fusion, all of the cold fusion containers are somewhere in the ballpark of 12 months before they'll be, up and running, and they're in production where they're making 1 million a year type of thing, okay?
A million units a year, right? Not $1 million, 1 million units, right?
1 million units a year, right. Now, it could be argued that the number 1 in our top 5, Andrew Rossi, is already in market because he sold his first 1 megawatt cold fusion plant in October. I was there in Bologna where he demonstrated to the first customer, and he produced for over about half a day. He had a unit running at half a megawatt. And let me just tell you, a megawatt, how much is a megawatt? You see those locomotives pulling a train down the road?
Yes.
An earlier version of a locomotive was about a megawatt, okay?
Okay.
It's a lot of power.
Right. And
they produced half a megawatt for half a day in self-run mode, and they had the customer was there with their scientists doing all the measurements on the input and the output, and they signed off on it at the end of the day. I was there. I saw it. Okay.
Awesome.
And they're number 1 in our top 5. And it took them until a couple of months ago, I think it was May, before they finally had it on site, installed, and they were all happy, and it was running just like, where all the gaskets were fully sealed and everything was running just like it was supposed to, and installed on site. It took him a while, okay? But supposedly he's in production making these 1 megawatt plants for only $2 million. You can buy one right now if you want. If you have $2 million spare and you want to buy a 1 megawatt heat plant, you can do it.
But we have to get the price down. I mean, come on,
right.
Sterling. I mean,
right. So this is supposedly on market right now, but no, we're talking about 5 kilowatts per 5 kilowatt systems for home heat. That'll be about 12 months away. Okay.
Yeah, and a typical home uses about 15 kilowatts if I do my math correctly. Is that right?
Well, that's electricity, and that's peak power.
Okay.
And what happens, here's an equation that you need to know. This is a pretty good ballpark equation that I heard one time, and I as far as I know, it's pretty accurate. Your peak is your average is about 5% of peak. Okay?
All right.
So if your average, which, and everyone knows their average because they get the bill at the end of the month, there's so many kilowatt hours that you use, so many, 1,000 kilowatt hours that you use in the course of a month.
Right.
So if, let's say, for example, my house, at one point was about half a kilowatt was average. So that means my peak was about 20 kilowatts.
Okay.
Okay. And that's pretty close to average across the United States in the Western world, so, for the most part. Okay? So if you had the ability to have a battery that you could store and save everything that you're not using when you don't need it, which is what a typical solar system is about, you save everything into a battery and then you run it through an inverter and you run your house off the inverter if you're off grid. Okay?
Yes.
And it's very expensive, $30,000 for something that's going to run your house.
Right.
So those are just kind of, so you know, those are some of the numbers that you might, that just throw around. So yeah, 15, 20 kilowatt, it would make your house happy so that if you had a 20 kilowatt system, you would never run out of, you would always have as much as you needed when you've got everything turned on at once. You come home at the end of the day, you've got your washer, dryer, dishwashers running, you've got your air conditioners running, etc. Mm-hmm. But that's really overkill. And so you could probably get away with something a lot less than that if you were going to be budgetary and you do a grid tie system where you sell back to the grid what you don't need, and the meter turns backwards when you're selling it back and it turns forward when you're pulling it from them when you need more than what you have, etc. So really, a 2 kilowatt system, if you had a battery bank that was really good, would be more than enough.
Mm-hmm. And is that the system you're talking about is going to be available within 12 months? Or you believe?
I think so. And these cold fusion systems are heat. Okay?
Right.
And so that's only half of what you need. You need to heat your home, you need to heat your water for culinary, and then you need to make electricity. So by the time you run a generator and you got a turbine, etc., that can start getting very expensive. And so the cold fusion systems will probably not be making electricity for maybe 24 months. But we have other things in our top 5 that probably will be there available before then. There's one that we've not talked about yet, which is a noble gas engine. And they may be available as soon as September.
I don't think I know what the noble gas engine is.
Back about 4 decades ago, a guy named John Papp, or Joseph Papp, had what's called a noble gas engine. A noble gas is there on the right-hand side of the periodic chart. They're the gases that are happy as could be. They're not going to react with anything because they got their electron shells are fully filled. Okay, helium, xenon, argon, etc. These are noble gases, and they're called inert. They're not going to react with anything. Mm-hmm. But what happens is a noble gas engine doesn't run on a chemical process. It's not an explosion scenario. It goes into a plasma state and then out of a plasma state, into a plasma state, out of a plasma state. And every time it pushes the piston down, and you don't have to keep replacing the gases every cycle because you have all the gases you need in that chamber that's going to last about 6 months. Okay?
Like a Sterling engine almost.
Kind of, yeah. In terms of not having to replenish the gases that are in the chamber. Okay. Because it basically, it's a nuclear process as far as we can tell. It's going into a plasma state and out of a plasma state, and there's something nuclear that's going on, so you're getting a lot of energy, but you don't have radiation going on. You're not going to be, putting out radioactive elements that you're going to take zillions of years before they're not dangerous anymore. You don't have any of that going on, okay? Mm-hmm. And yet it's a nuclear process, so you have a lot of energy without having all the problems of nuclear reactions in terms of all the residual radiations that you have with the nuclear power plant that you're used to thinking about, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
Same thing with cold fusion. Cold fusion doesn't have any of the residual radiation problems that you have with your nuclear power plant, even though it's a nuclear process.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There's going to be some negative connotations with nuclear, though. People are going to get scared about that just because it has
right, because that's what they're used to.
Yeah.
But this is it's a new nuclear. It's a safe nuclear. And really quick, we haven't mentioned this yet, but cold fusion, the reason it's called cold fusion is because in comparison to the sun, where you have 100 million degrees in order for it to fuse together and have this big reaction, it can happen at the basically ambient temperatures. Maybe it could start going on at 400 degrees or maybe 100 degrees and it starts reacting. Mm-hmm. So this is cold fusion compared to the sun's hot fusion.
Right.
Hence the name cold fusion, because in order to get the reaction to take place, it can happen at nominally room temperature, so to speak. I mean, that's late. It's an exaggeration, but you get the idea.
Right. Well, that's very exciting stuff, and I have not heard of that one before. I'm sure you've heard of John Searle's SEG.
Uh-huh.
Are you familiar with that by firsthand experience, or do you know anything about it?
Not in terms of having seen it myself, but they do welcome people to go to their lab in California and see it. If you want to invest, if you want to bring people to the table, if you want to help them move the technology forward, come on by, check it out. They're very close to replicating that technology. That's another one that's in our runners-up. I think they're about 8 or 9 in our runners-up right now. They're getting very close to getting a full replication of what he had almost 4 or 5 decades ago. Right. He's about 80 years old. He's still doing very well, very cogent. He knows what he's talking about. He says, do this, do this, do this, and you'll have that result. They do it, and it works. And he has a 100% batting record so far.
That's an amazing story. I don't know if you've seen the movie done about him and the SEG.
Yeah, it's excellent.
It's fabulous. Yeah. Bradley Lockerman, I believe, did it.
Yep. Yeah, he's involved in replicating that too. He's in the deep end, swimming with all the rest of the guys, making this thing work.
Awesome. Well, you can get the video at johnsearlestory.com.
Highly recommended. It's excellent.
Of course, I've been in the audio engineering business for 35 years. And for many years before we went to digital, everything was analog tape. And I don't know how much you know about magnetics or
a little
bit about that. But the way analog tape works is that you've got this material on a plastic backing, usually some kind of magnetic material, either iron oxide or whatever, and it goes across this metal head that's got a gap in it. And as the tape moves across the head, the sound of the music or whatever you're recording varies the electrical energy in that head as the tape moves across, and that magnetizes and demagnetizes the particles that are on the plastic tape as it goes by the head. Mm-hmm. The thing that I found interesting about Searle's device was that he thought of using alternating current and direct current at the same time to imprint a magnetic impulse on a magnet, which was genius. Why do we not do that now? I do not even know. It's ingenious. Because it allows you to curve the magnetic lines of force around a cylinder, which sounds like, who cares? But when you just hear it by itself, but what it really does is it causes the cylinder to turn around the plate on its own. It's constantly falling around the circle. I got really involved in researching that a couple of years ago when a friend, David Wilcock, told me about the technology. And so I kind of dove off the deep end doing the research about it. And so, which was I guess, sort of the impetus for me getting where I am here talking to you about this, because it opened some doors to see about the existence of other over Unity devices, not necessarily the ones that produce anti-gravitic effects, but produce more energy than they consume. And then it got me to thinking, oh my goodness, why do more people not know about this? Why isn't this front page news? Why are we not running after this technology with full guns right now? I mean,
because the guys who are in power and the media that basically we've learned to trust over the years is basically not worthy of the trust anymore, but we still trust them as if they were. They become lapdogs for the establishment. They become prostitutes. And Gerald Celente calls them prostitutes, which is an excellent description of them.
That is a great term.
It really is so accurate. Is the media, the mainstream media that we've come to trust to tell us the scoop about what we need to know about society and about sciences. They are so out of touch with what is really important and good and what's going on. They basically take their marching orders from their paymasters who are oil interests. Do you know GE owns basically one of the largest media companies on the planet?
NBC, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And so why do we trust them? And I tell you, when these things start coming out and people realize that they have not been told about this stuff, they're going to be so pissed off. And we're going to have a major abandonment of the mainstream media. They're going to lose all credibility.
Oh, I cannot wait. I cannot wait. Because once I did the research in this whole area that you and I are talking about here, and I found out the depth and the sheer number of devices that are available. And by the way, I learned quite a bit about this by going to peswiki.com, your site. And I found quite a bit of information there that actually sent me on other areas of research. Once I found out how many devices have actually been made that produce this effect, and then how no one knows about it, I started to get pissed off. I mean, honestly, I said, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And of course, Hey, Larry, let's
turn the tables for a second. I want people to understand. I want your audience to know who you are. Let's tell them about you just for a second. Your background. I mean, you are a major player in the media. Just tell them really briefly who you are.
Well, I'm a music producer. I've been in the business for 35 years, so media is kind of a broad category, but music is really my focus. I'm a producer engineer who worked with about 300 different artists over the past 35 years. They're all listed on my website at larrysire.com. And some of them are famous.
Names for a second.
Some of them are names you've heard of before. Most of them are not, but I'll just give you a few names of probably the most work I did was over a 20-year period with a group called Asleep at the Wheel. And through that group, I worked with George Strait, Garth Brooks. I mean, I've worked with George Martin of the Beatles. I produced the Dixie Chicks. I was one of the first producers of the Dixie Chicks. And over the course of 20 years, I've won 9 different Grammys. So
that's pretty good. And see, this is what's cool, Larry, is that you kind of represent the turning point where you are you're in bed with mainstream media, but you're like a whistleblower. You're saying, we've got a problem. We are missing the game here because you are mainstream media. You're from the music industry. You're not from the science industry. So maybe that's not your niche, and so it's not your place to say this, but you're saying it anyway.
Exactly. I decided that people need to know. Everybody, the general public needs to know that these devices exist. That what they're learning in universities, what they're being taught in schools, what is being shown on television is not always the truth. I'll just say that. It's not always the truth. There's a larger story going on here. And it's in our best interest to do research on our own, just like I did. I mean, I didn't know I was going to go down this rabbit hole, finding out about this stuff. I mean, the only reason I'm into this right now is because David Wilcox said, you know, we were talking one day and he said, have you heard about John Searle's SEG? And of course, you know, being a novice and not knowing anything about it, I said, no, what is it? What is it? Tell me, who is this guy? And he described the SEG being a device that was made in the 60s that when it was overdriven, it overcame gravity and took off. And he built 42 of these devices over the course of 20 or 30 years. And of course, my bullshit flag went up immediately. I said, bullshit. You know, that's not possible. And he said, no, seriously, do the research. And so, because David is a friend of mine, we work together. We've done several conferences together. I run his website. We've done many music projects together also. I trust him. He said to research, so I did. So I went down the John Searle SEG path, read everything I could get my hands on about it, and came to the conclusion that, oh my God, this really happened. This is real. And then the next logical question is, if this is real, are there any other devices out there that I don't know about that have similar properties? Are there other over unity devices? And sure enough, I found roughly 20. I researched about 20 devices that produce over unity.
Any one of which, if they were to make it to market, would totally revolutionize this planet.
Exactly. And so there's
20 of them.
Exactly. And this is why you and I are talking right now, because I am going to make it my mission to let people know about this. The people that I have contact with, they are going to know about this. Now I don't have mainstream media connections. I'll admit that right now. I have a relatively small group of people that listen to me, but it doesn't matter. It's going to take people like me to let their friends know that this technology exists today, that over unity is possible, and we have to go there. We have to move there. I'm sorry, I get off my soapbox. This was supposed to be an interview about you.
No. I wanted to go there because I want your audience to understand, because my audience is going to be listening to this too, and they need to know who you are, and that you're speaking from a position of you've got muscle in your area, and you're like a whistleblower. You're saying, look, we gotta, it's somebody of stature like you have celebrity stature to stand up and say enough is enough. You know, you're willing to put your neck on the line and put your reputation, put your name and your reputation of what you've built over a lifetime, of what you've done with your life, to say, I don't like what's going on here, and I am not going to let this happen. I'm going to do everything I can to make a difference here, and I salute you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really admire you too, because I mean, I only listed just a few of the things that you've done in your career here, and at the end of this, I would like to give you time to go through and list some other things that you've done also that are on your website that are very impressive. I didn't read the whole thing because we had so much problems getting my Skype working, that I didn't feel like I should take any more time reading that. I wanted to get to the meat of what you and I were talking about. But the point is that I also wanted to say that that's one of the reasons, because of this knowledge issue or this hidden technology issue, one of the reasons I'm writing a fictionalized book about suppressed technology. It's called The Most Dangerous Device, which is exactly the name of this radio show, The Most Dangerous Device, because it deals with a guy who invents an over unity device, and he has to deal with the consequences with the powers that be who try to prevent it from being made. It's a fictionalized story, but it's one other way that people will get educated to the fact that, hey, you know, is this real or is this a story? And if they do any research at all, if they do any thinking with their own minds, they will find out, oh my God, over unity devices do exist, and they will lead them down a similar path.
Yeah. I want to go back to what we were saying earlier about mainstream media ignoring this stuff. And I want to just show you how blatant the ignoring is.
Okay.
I live here in Utah, where Pons and Fleischmann came from, that made international news a sensation back when they made their announcement about cold fusion.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was, I was talking earlier about MIT. The Miss Schwartz, one of the best scientists on this subject, is at MIT. MIT is also the institution that is primarily responsible for putting the death knell and calling cold fusion junk science. Okay. And let me tell you just really briefly about how that happened. Back in '89, when the cold fusion was going all gangbuster and everyone getting excited about it, there were some scientists from MIT who were, by the way, involved in hot fusion. So they had a vested interest they had a conflict of interest is a better way of saying it. Because they were there was a multi-billion-dollar industry that they were the lead scientists for, and they were going to put basically this thing to rest. And so they went about trying to replicate cold fusion. They were doing an experiment. They cooked the books, and even before their experiment was done, they had a quote-unquote wake for cold fusion. It was the death knell of cold fusion, and they had this party even before the results were done. And they basically said, oh, it's junk. That was basically the turning point, was MIT. Everyone respects MIT, right? And these guys, number one, had a conflict of interest. Number two, cooked their books and gave bogus information about the science. This is criminal.
Yes.
It is criminal. These guys should be in jail.
I agree. Totally.
And these guys are the ones who basically called it junk science, okay? That's where the term came from these guys.
Mm.
That should make you so pissed. So I go to this cold fusion 0.5 megawatt demonstration in Bologna. Okay? I'm from Utah, and I'm calling the Salt Lake Tribune, I'm calling the Desert News, I say, look, this is cool stuff. You guys should at least say something about it. You can say it's junk, but you need to say something. Not a peep. Not a peep.
Yeah.
Since January of 2011, we are now in July of 2012. Not one mainstream newspaper in Utah has said anything about cold fusion. Not a peep.
And why do you think that is, Sterling?
Because they're prostitutes.
Exactly. But they get their money. They're being paid not to do that. It's not in their financial best interest to cover that story. Which leads us back to what we touched on earlier when we talked about is how everything is tied to money and how money is tied to energy and how energy and money together create an imprisonment system for us. So the only way to truly have freedom on this planet is to have free energy. And everybody, it has to be free. Everything has to be free.
Well, let's really quick. I just want to clarify again, the term free energy doesn't mean the energy is free for purchase. It means that the energy source is free and the device is so cheap that it becomes a non-issue. Right now, energy is getting more and more expensive. They got this idea of peak oil. It's getting more expensive. You got to cut left and right and they don't tell you that there's a solution around the corner that's going to be 10 times cheaper than what you're paying for coal.
Right.
They don't want you to know that.
Right.
Because free energy is all about I love where you're going with this, but I want to clarify that free energy doesn't mean you're not going to pay for energy. It means that the source is free and the device is so cheap that the energy becomes a non-issue. You can drive your car as far as you want without stopping for fuel because the device is sitting in the back of your car that's pulling energy from the ambient like Nikola Tesla's Pierce Arrow device. Yeah. He had a car that goes 90 miles an hour. It was pulling energy from the ambient. We'd never have to stop for fuel. That was back, almost 100 years ago he had that thing going.
Right.
And we've got a guy down in the Philippines who's replicated that and is trying to take it to the market, having a hard time getting money.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
That's the thing. Let's go back to another point you made. You said you've got 20 devices you know of. There are 30 genres of energy. Solar is a genre. Wind is a genre. Geothermal is a genre. Tide is a genre. There are 30 genres of free energy, each one of which has like 5 companies who are trying to take it to market.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's a lot more than I imagined, which is great news. It really is great news. I'd like to just take a little divergent path now and just do some speculation. You're an educated man. You've got a degree in this area of science.
And let me just brag for a second, okay?
Go for it.
My dad is an atomic clock physicist formerly at NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology in Boulder, Colorado, that has become prostituted by covering up for the 911 Building 7, saying that it was, giving some stupid quote unquote scientific explanation of how the building could come down. Total cover job for the federal government that was complicit in those buildings coming down through controlled demolition. Anyway, my dad's from NIST, Boulder, Colorado. He is the scientist behind the ultra-precise timekeeping, which makes all of our devices possible with GPS. Almost everything, the modern world would not exist without ultra-precise timekeeping. My dad is the point man. He received the Time Lord Award last year in, I think it was Switzerland or something like that, over there in Europe. He got the Time Lord Award for being the #1 guy in timekeeping, okay? I'm his son. I'm not stupid.
That's why you're the #1 guy for me to call for this radio show. Go on with your bad self.
I just wanted to, my dad has built one of the best solar homes on the planet. If you Google Allan, Allan, solar home, you'll find my dad's solar home. I've got to build a website page about his solar home. 10 different solar principles he's involved in his solar home. It's amazing. And he's been doing this for 20 years. He knows what he's doing. He's a very bright scientist. I was raised on the idea of alternative energy. And I lived in a home that runs off solar. So I understand the principle of renewable energy, and I'm going the next step. I'm pushing the envelope into these new genres that are outside the box.
It may take 2 or 3 generations for this to actually come to fruition.
But you know what is going to happen? It's going to be very quick, because what's going to happen is right now we're on the cusp as the old powers that be, the old paradigm of the central control paradigm that controls everything, is on its way out. You've seen the movie Thrive.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful movie. Wonderful.
Excellent. I love it. We promote it like crazy because it's excellent. Right on point. Not that it's 100% true, but he's so close. And he talks about the corruption, he talks about the conspiracy, he talks about the powers that be that are controlling anything. He talks about society being addicted, and we're eating 7 times our weight every day, this caterpillar that is so ugly and bloated, and then it goes into this cocoon, and boom, out comes this beautiful butterfly. That's what we're at right now. We're in this transition point. As the society is collapsing, as we are eating 7 times our weight every day, we're going to this cocoon, we're going to come out as a caterpillar. It's inevitable. Free energy is the future. Free energy is going to empower humanity. Is going to give us the free energy is the best point of revolution, is to support free energy as a tangible means to help this butterfly, come out of the cocoon, and this new society, this empowered society where when you do something that you love versus what you hate, working for somebody else, you're 6 times more productive.
Exactly. Exactly. My point exactly. And that's an excellent transition to where I'm wanting you to speculate on. I want you to imagine we have already made the transition to the point where we have a free energy device in every home. We have a free energy device in every car. And by the way, that's a wonderful way to distribute the power No longer do we have a pyramidal scheme to where one power company tries to...
And our cars are flying, by the way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Exactly. No longer are we to the point where one power company tries to power 10 million homes. Every home powers it, and there's redundancy in the power structure, which is a much better way to live on the planet. Redundancy.
Your portable devices don't have a plug because you don't need one, because they have built into them the power, and that's 1 year for market, by the way.
That would be awesome. But speculate with me then. We've already made the transition into a free energy device in every home and a free energy device in every car, and all our devices get their power from radiated power. From whatever remains. Okay. Whether not that in our lifetime, our grandchildren's lifetime, or next year, we don't know. Let's assume it's there. What will the social implications be for a life like that on this planet?
Well, number one, we're not fighting for oil. We're not dependent on the powers that be because they're irrelevant. They're basically rendered obsolete. So we don't have to fight over stuff anymore. We can be peaceful. War is now obsolete, unnecessary. We're an enlightened civilization. We're able to do what we're best at rather than what we hate doing. We love what we do. Every person on the planet does what they do the best and they love. It's utopia. I really believe that heaven on earth is coming, and that the powers that be, or the destruction that they're planning for the planet, that there will be some destruction that will happen probably. We're going to go through a transitional phase. The bad guys are going to have their way for a while. We're probably going to hit the wall to a certain extent to wake up, but we're going to heaven on earth. We're moving to a very glorious civilization, and free energy, I believe, is going to be a key player in bringing that about, both in empowering the individual, both physically and spiritually.
I agree, and I believe that's true. The golden age, as has been predicted for millennia, the golden age, I think we're headed that way. But, this is speculation, and I agree it is speculation. However, it has its roots and a basis for a way for it to happen in these devices that we're talking about right now. There is a path to that. There is a path to that. I can see it.
I have to also mention that free energy devices are not the panacea. They're not the end-all be-all. They're a physical manifestation of what needs to happen, but there also has to be a spiritual transformation of society. We have to stop. We have to grow up spiritually too. We have to get away from the scarcity mentality and there's going to have to be a transformation spiritually. We do need to have a born again experience as a society. And I'm not talking about becoming a bunch of religious zealots, because that's not what it's about. But we do need to have a spiritual transformation, or else free energy devices will give us the way to blow ourselves up.
I agree 100%. And I wasn't going to go there on this show. However, when I read on your website about your connection to spirituality, a tingle in my mind said, well, maybe I should talk about that. One of the things that you may or may not know is that I've been teaching, I teach A Course in Miracles, basically, and I've taught it since 2006. And I've been
A Course in Miracles?
A Course in Miracles, and I've been a student since 1988. It's non-denominational. It does use Christian terminology, but it's more like Buddhism than it is anything else. But it's really its own thing.
See, that doesn't surprise me one bit, because I find that people who are outside the box on one thing realize that everything else is screwed up too. It's alternative everything. It's homeschool. It's
exactly
everything is screwed up.
Yes,
the government's screwed up. The religions are screwed up. Medicine is screwed up. Everything is screwed up. And when you realize one of them, you realize all of them.
Well, we could probably have about 4 or 5 shows if we go down those topics. But we probably should stay with what our original topic was. But yeah, for sure. I agree with you that for this transformation to happen, there needs to be a spiritual transformation also. But that's going to come with it.
Don't you find that too, that when you talk to somebody that's awake on one issue, they're awake on or they're waking up on all of them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to get to the point where we are happy with ourselves and not see our solution to our problems in somebody else's possessions. We're taught that at a very young age. Like, well, I want what Johnny has. I want what that person has. And we're never introspectively looking at what we already have.
See, Larry, what would have happened if free energy did come out 20 years ago during the roaring 20s or 30s or 40s, and we had no constraint, we had no love of the planet and of environmental concerns. I mean, a lot of that was born of the left and even of the conspirators who wanted to use it to control us. But at the same time, the idea of environmentalism is very sound. It's a true principle. And we needed to grow up in that regard before we had free energy devices, or else we would have used free energy devices to destroy the planet.
That's true.
We would have had houses on the top of, we would have raped the planet by, we could build anywhere, do anything. And if we don't have the constraints of responsibility first, then we could have used free energy to destroy the planet even faster.
Yeah, I agree. As a side note, have you read the book Tia Uba?
I haven't. Not even heard of it.
No, good. I might have showed you something. There is a book. It's about 186 pages. It's free on the internet. You can download it. It's Tia Uba, ThiaOouba.com. And it describes some interesting devices in that book. It's basically a story about what happens to a gentleman who lived in northeastern Australia in 1987. And it's 10 days. It's an account of what happened to him over 10 days in northeastern Australia. And he basically wrote a book about it. It's a little 186-page book. I highly recommend it. I'm sure you will enjoy it because it will have concepts that directly relate to what you and I have been talking about the last hour, and how important they are to tie those things into spirituality. And that's the connection between what we were just talking about there. That book directly ties in spirituality with over-unity devices, with an advanced, evolved society that lives on a planet that cares about the planet.
Earlier we were talking about this idea of addiction and how far do we have to fall before we wake up? Or are we going to wake up? Are we going to see the handwriting on the wall and wake up before things fall apart, before we hit the wall fully? And I would really like to petition the audience to get our act together and wake up as soon as possible, because the harder we hit the wall before we wake up, the harder it will be to come out of the ashes, so to speak, because if you think about it, in today's society, with all of our technology, with the communications, with the infrastructure that we have, we could really kick butt and get these free energy devices out there in a matter of months. But if we hit the wall and the infrastructure goes away and we can't just order a part from, Radio Shack and it comes a couple days later, but it takes months by ground, by somebody riding a horse, it's going to take decades. And so I would really like to opt for the wake up and see the handwriting on the wall without hitting the wall route.
I agree, but absolutely. But at first, the first thing that people need to even know that this is even possible. Remember, we're dealing with a society that in general believes that none of this is possible. They believe hook, line, and sinker what the media is telling them. They're so busy making a living, they don't have the time to think outside the box like you and I are thinking outside the box. They don't have time. They're busy. They get up in the morning, they do their job that they hate to make the $100 that they have to pay their rent and their food, and they go to bed, and that's it. But those people comprise over 90% of the people on the planet. Probably even more. Those are the people that need to be educated about this. So we have to educate them about this. That to me is the number one priority.
And that may be where people like you in the entertainment industry come up with, like you're saying, this book that could get, look at how popular the book Harbinger is. It's a number one bookseller in New York Times, and it's an excellent message. And it's written in a fictional way, but it's based on factual things that have happened. That basically in Isaiah 9 verse 10 and 11, 9/11, Scripture is totally applied to us today and is saying, wake up. This is a wake-up call to turn around and get back to God and stop being such an idolatrous, etc. people. It's really an amazing book, and he was able to get that message out in a fictional way. And if you could fictionalize I'm excited to hear about the book you're doing. It could really have a great impact. I'm rooting for you.
Oh, thank you. And I'm really excited about it. You can read the first 15 chapters for free online right now. So it's totally fictionalized, but it's based on, I'll tell you right now, it's based on the SEG. And I tie in spirituality with the SEG with an over-unity device in a society where the power structure doesn't want that kind of thing coming out. So I'm hoping that it'll at least get some people to ask the question, is this even possible? So we'll see what happens. But thank you.
Well, we get the government we deserve, and when we finally wake up, hopefully things can shift quickly, because I like warm showers.
Yeah, I'm kind of fond of eating myself.
And not eating your neighbor, right?
No, I don't want to get to that point at all. I don't think
that's hitting the wall.
Yes.
When we, not that I would do that, but that's the Mad Max world we're headed for if we don't turn around and wake up first.
Well, hopefully people will open their minds and they will see that the path that we're on right now is unsustainable. It is simply unsustainable. We cannot produce enough oil to energize the planet at the current rate of consumption. We continue to grow, and there's just not enough energy via oil or coal to do that.
This device, this number 3 in our top 5, is made of basically dirt cheap materials that are basically as benign as dirt. And you could power, you're using what's called atomic deposition, where you can do a football field size area on a postage stamp. That postage stamp size device could power your cell phone for 20 plus years without ever needing to be replaced. And it's a continuous input of power, so you don't have to plug in your device. You could actually put onto your circuit the power you need at all the points where you need power. And there's no problem. If you don't need power, it is not going to melt down or anything. It just, it pulls power as it needs it. And, if you don't need it, fine. And you could basically print your power onto your circuit board. And the postage size device would be $1 to manufacture.
Why isn't Apple Computer jumping on that right now?
You should see the list of people that are in line wanting to have a piece of the action. It's pretty amazing. And this is third-party tested, and it's actually out of Salt Lake City. I'm about a 20-minute drive from their guys' headquarters where they're working on this. That's
awesome. That's just awesome. Well, we have gone over the allotted time that I was originally scheduling to talk to you, so I don't want to use any more of your time than I already have, and I certainly appreciate your time and your input in this conversation, Sterling. And
it's been very enjoyable. I've enjoyed this. Thank you.
It's been a blast. And so, I'm going to sign off for now, and thank you all for joining me on The Most Dangerous Device. Thank you for listening to The Most Dangerous Device radio show. Until the next time, keep an open mind. Let the light shine in.